BTS news today. In the long, quiet stretch of BTS's hiatus, when the world felt strangely paused and the familiar rhythm of comebacks, live streams, and airport sightings faded into uncertainty, something else began to grow louder. It was not an announcement, nor a scandal confirmed by headlines, but a question whispered across timelines, fan cafes, and late-night group chats. A question that refused to disappear no matter how carefully it was ignored. Did Jungkook, in the silence of the hiatus, reach out to Jimin's family? The hiatus was never just a professional pause. To ARMY, it felt personal, almost intimate, as if a door to a shared emotional space had closed without warning. Jungkook, once the most visible and emotionally open of the group, became noticeably quieter. His social media activity slowed. Lives became rare. When he did appear, his words were careful, his smile softer, his eyes carrying a weight that fans struggled to name. It was during this time that a small rumor began circulating, one that at first seemed too tender, too private to be true. The rumor did not start with a leak or a photograph. It began with a sentence posted anonymously on a Korean community board late at night. The post was quickly deleted, but screenshots spread like wildfire. It claimed that Jungkook had personally contacted someone close to Jimin during the hiatus, not for business, not for publicity, but for something deeply personal. The word family appeared only once, almost hesitantly, but that was enough to ignite a storm. At first, many dismissed it as fanfiction disguised as insider gossip. After all, BTS rumors were nothing new. But this one felt different. It was not sensational in the way scandals usually are. There were no accusations, no controversy, no villain. Instead, there was a strange tenderness to it, a quiet gravity that made people stop and reread. Why would Jungkook call Jimin's family? What could possibly compel him to cross such a private boundary during a time when both artists were intentionally stepping back from the public eye? As days passed, fans began revisiting old interviews, old moments, old silences. They noticed things that once seemed insignificant. Jungkook's subtle shift in tone whenever Jimin's name came up. The way he paused before answering certain questions, as if weighing how much truth could safely escape. During one rare live broadcast, Jungkook mentioned people who worry even when they don't say it out loud, a sentence that lingered long after the stream ended. He did not name anyone, but many felt the weight of Jimin in those words. The hiatus itself had been framed as a necessary period of rest and individual growth, but behind the official statements was a more complex emotional reality. Both Jungkook and Jimin had spoken at different times about burnout, pressure, and the fear of losing themselves in expectations. Jimin, in particular, had hinted at internal struggles, describing moments of self-doubt and emotional exhaustion. Fans remembered his confession about feeling like he had to be perfect, about the loneliness that sometimes accompanied success. In that context, the idea that Jungkook might have reached out to Jimin's family did not feel intrusive. It felt protective. What made the rumor harder to ignore was the timing. Around the same period, Jimin himself went unusually quiet. His appearances were minimal, his updates sparse. When he did resurface, there was a noticeable softness to him, a calm that felt earned rather than performative. In one interview, he spoke briefly about people who stood by me when I couldn't stand myself, a line that sent chills through those who were already watching closely. Again, no names were mentioned, but the absence of specifics only deepened the mystery. Industry insiders, when asked indirectly about the rumor, offered no confirmations but also no denials. One source, speaking carefully, suggested that the members of BTS often took care of each other in ways the public would never fully understand. Another hinted that Jungkook had always been particularly sensitive to the emotional states of those closest to him, especially Jimin. These comments, vague as they were, only fueled speculation. To understand why this rumor resonated so deeply, one must look beyond idol culture and into the human bond that Jungkook and Jimin have displayed for over a decade. Their relationship has always existed in a space that defies simple labels. They are bandmates, yes, but also confidants, creative partners, and emotional anchors for each other. From their trainee days to their rise as global icons, they have been seen supporting each other through tears, injuries, and moments of self-doubt. Fans have watched Jungkook's instinctive reactions whenever Jimin appeared overwhelmed. The way he would move closer, speak softer, become more attentive. During the hiatus, when the usual structures of schedules and group activities were removed, those instincts may have had nowhere public to go. If Jungkook truly felt that Jimin was struggling in silence, reaching out to his family would not be an act of overstepping but of care. In Korean culture, family holds profound significance, especially in matters of emotional well-being. Contacting a family member can be a way of ensuring support without exposing someone to public scrutiny. Yet the question remains unanswered. There has been no confirmation from Jungkook, no statement from Jimin, no official acknowledgement from HYBE, and perhaps that is intentional. Some things are meant to remain private, especially when they involve genuine human concern rather than curated narratives. Still, fans continue to search for clues. They analyze lyrics released during or after the hiatus, finding lines about distance, worry, and unseen hands offering comfort. They recall moments when Jungkook spoke about wanting to protect the people he loves, even if it meant staying silent himself. Silence in this context becomes not an absence but a presence, a deliberate choice. The rumor also sparked a broader conversation within the fandom about boundaries and respect. While curiosity is natural, many fans expressed a desire to protect the privacy of both Jungkook and Jimin. They argued that if such a call did happen, it was never meant to be known. It was not a performance, not a gesture for applause, but a quiet act of humanity. Others felt that acknowledging such care only deepened their admiration, reminding them that behind the polished stages and global fame are individuals capable of deep empathy. As time passed, the initial frenzy softened into contemplation. The question transformed from "did he do it?" to "what does it mean if he did?" And perhaps that is where the true significance lies. Whether or not Jungkook called Jimin's family, the fact that so many believe he could have speaks volumes about how he is perceived. It speaks to a trust built over years, to a belief in his sincerity and emotional depth. In recent appearances, both Jungkook and Jimin seem steadier, more grounded. There is a renewed warmth when they interact, a quiet understanding that needs no explanation. During a group moment, Jungkook was seen listening intently as Jimin spoke, his expression unreadable yet deeply focused. Fans noticed, as they always do. They always notice. The unspoken secret, then, may never be confirmed. It may remain a question suspended in the space between what is shown and what is felt. But in that space, something meaningful exists. A reminder that not all acts of care are meant for the spotlight, that some connections are strongest when they are protected by silence. In an industry built on visibility, Jungkook's quietness during the hiatus became its own form of communication. And if somewhere within that silence there was a phone call, a conversation filled with concern rather than headlines, it would only reaffirm what many already believe: that behind the global star is a young man who cares deeply, who acts not for attention but for the people he loves. Until Jungkook chooses to speak or until Jimin decides to share, the question will remain unanswered. But perhaps that is exactly how it should be. Some secrets are not meant to be exposed. Some truths are strongest when they are simply felt. As the days turned into weeks and the hiatus slowly edged toward its end, the question did not disappear. Instead, it matured, shedding its initial shock and transforming into something quieter but far more enduring. Fans stopped chasing confirmation and began listening instead to the subtle emotional language Jungkook and Jimin had always spoken fluently, long before words were required. There was a noticeable change in Jungkook after the hiatus period. Those who followed him closely sensed it immediately. He appeared calmer, more introspective, as if something unresolved had finally found a place to rest. In one late-night appearance, when the lighting was dim and his voice unusually low, Jungkook spoke about learning that caring for someone does not always mean standing beside them in public. Sometimes, he said, it means stepping back, trusting others, and choosing silence even when you want to speak the loudest. The sentence was brief, but it struck deeply. Many felt it was not meant for the audience at all, but rather a reflection that had slipped out unintentionally. Jimin, on the other hand, emerged from the hiatus with a different kind of strength. He did not suddenly become louder or more expressive, but there was a steadiness to him that had not been there before. When asked about the break, he spoke about gratitude. He mentioned people who checked in without asking for anything in return, people who cared enough to worry quietly. He smiled when he said it, but his eyes told a story of moments spent away from cameras, moments when vulnerability was allowed to exist without judgment. The connection between these two narratives did not go unnoticed. Fans began placing the pieces together, not as detectives hunting for proof, but as witnesses to an emotional journey unfolding in fragments. The idea that Jungkook might have reached out to Jimin's family began to feel less like a rumor and more like a natural extension of who he has always been. Jungkook has never hidden the fact that he values family deeply, whether his own or those of the people closest to him. In past interviews, he spoke about respecting parents, about understanding that idols do not exist in isolation, but as part of families who share both pride and worry. What made the theory even more compelling was the absence of denial. In an industry where false rumors are often quickly addressed, this one was met with silence. No clarification, no correction, no subtle hint that fans were reading too much into nothing. That silence felt deliberate, almost protective, as if acknowledging or denying it would violate something sacred. Some insiders suggested that HYBE was aware of the discussions but chose not to interfere, understanding that the narrative was not harmful, but rather a testament to the human bonds within BTS. Behind the scenes, it is widely known that the members of BTS have always relied on each other in ways that go far beyond professional teamwork. During trainee days, they lived together, struggled together, and grew up under immense pressure. Jungkook, the youngest, often leaned on the older members, and Jimin, despite his own insecurities, frequently became a source of comfort for him. Over time, that dynamic evolved into something reciprocal, almost instinctual. When one faltered, the other noticed. During the hiatus, that instinct may have found its most mature expression. Rather than trying to fix things himself or demanding explanations, Jungkook may have chosen the most respectful path possible. By reaching out to Jimin's family, if the rumor holds any truth, he would have acknowledged his limits while still ensuring that Jimin was not alone. It would have been an act of trust, not control, recognizing that family support can offer something even the closest friend cannot. Fans who had experienced similar situations in their own lives found comfort in this possibility. Stories began appearing online from people who spoke about friends who had quietly contacted their families during difficult times, not as a betrayal but as a lifeline. In that sense, the rumor transcended fandom and became a shared human story. It was no longer just about Jungkook and Jimin. It was about care expressed through restraint, love shown through responsibility. As BTS gradually returned to group activities, the atmosphere between the members felt subtly transformed. There was laughter, of course, and familiar chaos, but also moments of stillness that carried weight. In one behind-the-scenes clip, Jungkook and Jimin were seen sitting side by side, not speaking, simply sharing space. It was an unremarkable moment on the surface, yet it lingered in the minds of those who understood how rare such silence can be in a world constantly demanding performance. When Jungkook glanced at Jimin during that moment, there was no playfulness, no teasing smile. There was something softer, almost relieved. Jimin, sensing the gaze, smiled faintly as if acknowledging something only the two of them understood. No words were exchanged, but the exchange itself felt complete. The unspoken secret, if it exists, may never be revealed because it does not need to be. Its power lies precisely in its ambiguity. It invites reflection rather than conclusion. It reminds fans that idols are not defined solely by what they share, but also by what they choose to protect. In a culture that often demands access to every detail, this story stands as a quiet rebellion, a boundary drawn not out of secrecy, but out of respect. As time moves forward and BTS continues their journey, the question may slowly fade from active discussion. New music, new performances, and new stories will inevitably take center stage. Yet for many, this period will remain unforgettable, not because of what was confirmed, but because of what was felt. The sense that somewhere away from stages and screens, genuine care was exchanged without witnesses. Perhaps one day, years from now, Jungkook or Jimin will speak about this time more openly, or perhaps they never will. Either way, the impact remains. In the silence of the hiatus, fans learned something profound. That sometimes the most meaningful actions are the ones we are never meant to see. And sometimes, love speaks loudest when it chooses to stay unspoken. Even after the group's activities slowly regained momentum, that period of silence continued to cast a long, reflective shadow. It became a reference point, an emotional chapter that fans would quietly return to whenever Jungkook or Jimin spoke about growth, healing, or learning to rely on others. The hiatus was no longer just a pause in schedules. It had transformed into a marker of transition, a moment when something fragile had been acknowledged and protected rather than exposed. What stood out most in the months that followed was how Jungkook's language changed when he talked about responsibility. In earlier years, responsibility often meant practice, performance, or living up to expectations. Now it seemed to carry a different meaning. He spoke about responsibility as care, as knowing when to step in and when to step back. During one conversation, he said that loving someone sometimes means trusting the people around them more than trusting yourself. The words passed quickly, but they landed heavily for those who remembered the rumors. It sounded less like a philosophical thought and more like lived experience. Jimin too began to speak differently about family. Not directly, not in a way that invited speculation, but with warmth that felt newly grounded. He mentioned calling home more often. He spoke about hearing familiar voices when days felt overwhelming. There was comfort in how casually he said it, as if it had become a natural part of his routine rather than a last resort. Fans who believed in the unspoken secret heard echoes of it there, not as confirmation but as resonance. Interestingly, the members around them seemed subtly aware of something that had passed. There were moments when the group dynamic shifted gently toward Jimin, offering space rather than pressure, humor rather than scrutiny. Jungkook in particular appeared attentive in ways that were less visible but deeply intentional. He listened more. He interrupted less. When Jimin spoke, Jungkook's focus was unwavering, as though he understood the weight behind even the lightest words. The absence of dramatic revelation made the story more powerful. In a media landscape driven by exposure, this quiet narrative resisted being packaged. There was no climax, no tearful confession, no official explanation. Instead, there was continuity. Life moved forward, but it carried the imprint of what had been protected during the pause. Fans learned to read that continuity as proof in itself. As discussions continued online, many began reframing the question entirely. It was no longer about whether Jungkook had called Jimin's family, but about why that idea felt so believable. The answer lay in years of consistency. Jungkook had always been someone who worried deeply, sometimes too deeply, about the people he loved. He had spoken openly about fear of loss, about wanting everyone to stay healthy, about feeling responsible for happiness beyond his control. In that context, the rumor did not feel like a stretch, it felt aligned. There was also something telling about how Jimin never appeared uncomfortable when fans expressed concern during that time. He acknowledged worry with gratitude rather than defensiveness. He did not shut it down, but gently redirected it toward reassurance. It was as if he knew that people cared because they had sensed something real, even if they could not name it. That calm acceptance suggested that whatever had happened during the hiatus had strengthened him rather than burdened him. In later performances, fans noticed how Jungkook and Jimin moved together on stage with renewed sensitivity. Their timing felt more intuitive, their glances more deliberate. It was not flashy or dramatic, but steady, like two people who had weathered something quietly and come out with deeper trust. On stage, where everything is usually amplified, this subtlety stood out. The unspoken secret remained exactly that, unspoken, but it had shaped perception in a lasting way. It reminded fans that idols are allowed private acts of kindness, that care does not lose its value simply because it is unseen. In fact, it may gain more. The idea that Jungkook could have chosen the most discreet path to help someone he loved resonated because it contrasted so sharply with the constant exposure of their lives. As time continues, the story may slowly fade into the background of BTS history, remembered only by those who paid close attention. Or it may resurface one day in a passing comment, a line in a documentary, a quiet reflection shared years later. Until then, it exists as a shared understanding rather than a confirmed fact. And perhaps that is the most fitting ending, not a revelation but a recognition, that during a time of silence when the world was not watching, care may have been expressed in the simplest, most human way possible. A phone call, a moment of concern, a decision made out of love rather than obligation. In that possibility, fans found not answers but comfort.
Here we go.